I was barred from the family cruise ship, so I made the captain vanish. They said I was too old to get on the cruise ship, but I'm not going to sit here and let everyone else get in and enjoy themselves without me. Never. I'd show them. That night, under a moonless sky, I made the captain vanish without a trace. Want to know how I pulled it off? You're about to find out. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. You ever stood at the dock watching your family wave from a cruise ship you helped pay for? Their laughter floating across the water while you're left behind. I have. My name's Evelyn Harper, 68 years old, and last month I stood on that Portland dock, my hands clenched as the Starlight Voyager pulled away. My brother Martin, his new wife Clarice, and their whole clan were on board, toasting to our late father's legacy, a man I'd bathed, fed, and comforted through his final years. I wasn't invited. They said I was too old, too frail, too much trouble. My own family, sailing on a ship I'd partly owned, until Clarice's lawyers shredded my share, calling me unstable due to age. I watched the ship's lights fade, my chest tight with a rage I hadn't felt in years. They'd regret this, one way or another. It started with a text from my niece, Jules, Martin's daughter. I was at home sorting through Dad's old photos, him smiling on his fishing boat, the one we sold to fund the cruise ship stake, when my phone buzzed. "Sorry, Aunt Eve." Dad said no. "Clarice doesn't want drama on board." I stared at the words, my grip tightening until my knuckles whitened. Drama. I'd spent years keeping the peace, biting my tongue when Clarice sneered at my outdated ways, nodding when Martin dismissed my stories about Dad. I'd poured $50,000 into that ship, my savings from decades of teaching, thinking it'd be a family legacy. Clarice, with her sharp suits and sharper tongue, had undone it all, convincing Martin I was a liability. And Jules, sweet Jules, was too young to fight them. I tossed the phone on the couch, pacing my small living room. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. I'd cared for Dad when Martin was too busy with his tech startup, when Clarice was still a stranger. I'd changed his sheets, read him his favorite mysteries, held his hand when he forgot my name. That cruise was supposed to honor him, not erase me. I stopped by the window, the harbor visible in the distance, and muttered, "They think I'm done. They're wrong." The next morning, I called Clint, my old friend from my days volunteering at the harbor office. He was a retired private investigator, 70, with a gravelly laugh and a knack for bending rules. We'd bonded over coffee and complaints about bureaucracy, and I knew he'd hear me out. He answered on the second ring. "Evie, what's got you up so early? Missing the harbor gossip already?" "Something like that," I said, my voice tight. "Can you meet me? I need your brain." He chuckled. "Sounds like trouble, my favorite kind. Pier Cafe, noon." At the cafe, I laid it out. The cruise, Clarice's legal maneuvering, Jules's text. Clint leaned back, his weathered hands cradling a mug, his eyes narrowing as I spoke. "They screwed you, Evie," he said, whistling low. "Your own brother, too. That's cold. Cold doesn't cover it," I said, stirring my tea, the spoon clinking harder than I meant. "I want them to feel this, Clint. Not just Martin and Clarice, the whole ship. They're laughing on my dime." He grinned, a glint in his eye. "You're not talking about slashing tires, are you?" "Not exactly," I said, leaning in. "I want the captain gone. Brandon Royce. He's the ship's heart. Without him, they're stuck." Clint raised an eyebrow, but his grin widened. "Bold, dangerous, I like it. You got a plan?" "Not yet," I admitted. "That's where you come in." He nodded, pulling a notepad from his jacket. "All right, let's play dirty. First, we need intel. Royce's habits, ship security, the works. You still got friends at the harbor?" "A few," I said, thinking of the office where I'd volunteered, logging ship schedules and chatting with dock workers. "I could drop by, bring some banana bread. Nobody suspects an old lady with baked goods. Perfect, Clint said, jotting notes. I'll dig into Royce. Guy like that, running a fancy cruise? He's got secrets. Always do. We spent the next few days mapping the Starlight Voyager. Clint tailed Royce discreetly, blending into the harbor crowd in his faded cap and jeans. He learned the captain's routine: morning coffee at a dockside kiosk, late-night drinks at a dive bar, and a habit of lingering on the ship's bridge after hours. I visited the harbor office, my banana bread a golden ticket. The staff, mostly old friends, welcomed me like I'd never left. "Evelyn, you're a saint," said Marla, the office manager, grabbing a slice. "What's the occasion?" "Just missed you all," I lied, smiling as I leaned on the counter. "Heard the Voyager's a big deal. Tight security?" Marla shrugged, crumbs on her chin. "Cameras on the gangway, a few guards. Captain Royce runs a tight ship though, bit of a hotshot." I nodded, filing it away. As she rambled, I glimpsed a ship manifest on her desk. Crew schedules, maintenance logs. I didn't steal it, but I memorized what I could, my heart pounding. This was real now, no turning back. Clint called that night, his voice low, excited. "Got something on Royce," he said. "Meet me at the pier, usual spot." We sat on a bench, overlooking the water, the Voyager's silhouette looming in the distance. Clint lit a cigarette, the smoke curling in the dusk. "Your captain's dirty," he said. "Been taking bribes from rich passengers. Detours the cruise to international waters for illegal gambling, poker, blackjack, big money. Cops don't touch him. He's got friends in high places." I stared at the ship, my mind racing. "So he's not just a cog, he's the engine." "Exactly," Clint said, flicking ash. "Take him out, the whole operation stalls. Passengers get mad, your family's reunion goes to hell. Poetic, right?" I nodded, a slow smile spreading. I didn't need to sink the ship or hurt anyone else. Royce was the key. If he vanished, the cruise would falter, Martin and Clarice's perfect celebration crumbling. "How do we do it?" I asked. Clint grinned. "Non-violent, I assume. We could spook him. Blackmail maybe, use his gambling secret to make him run. Or make it look like he ran," I said, my voice steady. "No blood, no trace. Just gone." He laughed, clapping my shoulder. "Evie, you're a natural. We'll need a few things. Access to the ship, a way to plant evidence. You up for a little sneaking?" I thought of Jules' text, Clarice's smug legal letter, Martin's silence. "I'm up for anything," I said, my hands clenching. "They barred me from my own ship. Now they'll see what I'm capable of." We parted ways, Clint promising to scout the ship's security gaps, me vowing to charm more intel from the harbor office. As I drove home, the moonless sky felt like an ally, hiding my plans. Royce's secret was my weapon, but I wasn't naive. This was risky. Cameras, guards, a captain with powerful friends. One misstep, and I'd be the one caught. But the thought of Martin and Clarice, stranded mid-cruise, their faces falling as their plans collapsed, drove me forward. I'd make them feel what it was like to be left behind. And when I did, they'd know it was me. Be honest, have you ever wanted revenge but didn't know where to start? Share it in the comments. I'm listening. I drove home from the pier, the moonless sky a silent partner in my plans. The weight of Clint's words, Royce's gambling detours, his dirty bribes, fueling my resolve. The Starlight Voyager loomed in my mind, a floating monument to my family's betrayal. Martin, Clarice, even Jules. They'd barred me from the cruise I'd helped fund, erasing my stake and my place in Dad's legacy. But I wasn't done. Captain Brandon Royce, the ship's corrupt heart, was my target. If he vanished, their reunion would collapse, and they'd feel the sting of being left behind, just as I had. Clint and I had a plan. Non-violent, precise, a disappearing act that would leave no trace. As I pulled into my driveway, I whispered to myself, one step at a time, Evie, they'll see. The night before the cruise, I couldn't sleep, my nerves humming like a live wire. Clint had spent days scouting the ship's security. Cameras on the gangway, 2 guards at the main deck, a skeleton crew overnight. Royce's sloppy habits were our edge. He left his phone unlocked at the dive bar, his passwords scribbled on a napkin Clint had swiped. I'd charmed more from the harbor office, Marla's chatter about crew schedules, giving me a window. 3 a.m. When the dock was quiet, the guards distracted. But first, I had to get close to Royce, plant the seed for his exit. I baked banana bread again, this time for a chance meeting. I knew Royce's routine from Clint's intel. He'd be at the dockside kiosk that evening, grabbing a coffee before his final pre-cruise checks. I dressed in my old volunteer jacket, a gray scarf, hiding my face just enough, and headed to the harbor. The air was sharp, the water lapping against the piers as I spotted him. Tall, mid-40s, his captain's hat tilted back, laughing with the barista. I approached, bread wrapped in foil, my heart pounding, but my smile steady. "Captain Royce?" I said, holding out the loaf. "Evelyn Harper. I used to volunteer here, heard you're leading the Voyager. Thought you might like a little good luck for the trip." He blinked, caught off guard, then grinned, his ego flattered. "Well, that's kind of you, Evelyn. Smells great. You joining us?" I shook my head, my laugh soft, practiced. "Not this time. Family's on board though. Say, I found this at the office. Thought it might be yours." I pulled a small silver charm from my pocket, a cheap trinket shaped like an anchor, rigged with a tracking device Clint had sourced. I pressed it into his hand, my fingers brushing his, for smooth sailing. He pocketed it without a second glance, nodding. "Thanks, Evelyn. I'll keep it close." I walked away, my pulse racing. The tracker was live, pinging to Clint's phone. If Royce kept it on him, we'd know his every move. I texted Clint from my car. "Charms in. Ready for tonight." His reply was instant. "You're a pro. Shed at 2 a.m. Bring coffee." The harbor was a ghost town at 2 a.m. The Voyager's lights dim, its bulk swaying gently against the dock. I parked a block away, dressed in black, leggings, a hoodie, sneakers, silent on the pavement. My bag held a flashlight, gloves, and a thermos of coffee for Clint. The supply shed, a rusted shack near the pier, was our rendezvous, its lock long broken from my volunteer days. I slipped inside, the air thick with oil and salt, and found Clint already there, hunched over his laptop, the glow illuminating his weathered face. "Nice timing," he whispered, taking the thermos. "Royce is still on the bridge, tracker's working. Sloppy bastard didn't ditch the charm." I crouched beside him, my breath shallow. "You're into the ship's system." He grinned, tapping the screen. Royce's passwords were child's play. Got access to the control app, navigation, cameras, even the PA system. We can mess with his head, make him think he's exposed. I nodded, my mind sharp despite the hour. Our plan was simple, but delicate. Spook Royce into running. Clint would send an anonymous message to his phone, hinting at his gambling bribes, enough to make him panic. We'd use the ship's app to flicker lights, loop camera feeds, create chaos. The tracker would let us follow him if he bolted. No violence, no trace. Just a captain vanishing into the night, leaving the crews stranded. "Ready?" Clint asked, his finger hovering over the keyboard. "Do it," I said, my voice low. He typed the message. "We know about the gambling waters. Names, dates, payoffs. Leave now, or it's over." He sent it to Royce's personal number, pulled from the bar napkin. We watched the tracker's dot on his screen, still on the bridge, unmoving. Seconds ticked by, my heart in my throat. Then the dot shifted, fast, toward the crew quarters. "He's spooked," Clint said, his eyes glinting. "Let's give him a nudge." He tapped the app, dimming the bridge lights, then blaring a static burst through the PA system. The tracker showed Royce darting to the gangway, pausing, then moving again. "He's checking exits," Clint muttered, nervous. I leaned closer, the shed's cold metal pressing against my back. "Can you loop the cameras?" "Done," he said, fingers flying. "Guards won't see him, or us." If he runs, he's a ghost. I thought of Martin and Clarice, asleep in their luxury cabins, oblivious to the chaos brewing. They'd wake to a missing captain, a stalled ship, their perfect reunion in ruins. Jules's text, "Clarice doesn't want drama," burned in my mind. This wasn't drama. This was justice, sharp and cold. The tracker beeped. Royce was at the main deck, near the gangway. "He's got a bag," Clint said, squinting at his screen. "Looks like he's bailing." I exhaled, my hands trembling with adrenaline. "Follow him. We need to know where he goes." Clint nodded, packing his laptop. "Stay here. If he doubles back, you're our eyes." I gripped the flashlight, alone in the shed, the harbor's quiet hum surrounding me. The plan was working. Royce was running, just as we'd hoped, but a nagging doubt crept in. What if he didn't run far enough? What if he called his high-placed friends? Turned this back on us? I pushed it down. I'd come too far, risked too much. Martin and Clarice had taken my share, my family, my pride. Now I was taking something from them. My phone buzzed. "Clint. He's at the parking lot. Cars moving. Trackers strong." I exhaled, my breath visible in the cold. Royce was gone, for now. But the cruise wasn't over yet. The ship would stall, the passengers would panic, and Martin would know this wasn't an accident. I'd make sure of it. As I waited in the shed, the flashlight's beam steady in my hand, I felt a surge of power. They'd barred me, but I was still here, pulling strings they couldn't see. I crouched in the supply shed, the flashlight's beam steady in my hand, my heart still racing from the rush of seeing Royce's tracker vanish into the harbor parking lot. Clint's text, "He's moving. Tracker's strong," confirmed our plan was unfolding. Captain Brandon Royce, the Starlight Voyager's corrupt linchpin, was spooked, his gambling secrets exposed by our anonymous message. The cruise ship, carrying Martin, Clarice, and their smug reunion, was hours from departure, and we'd set the stage for chaos. But it wasn't enough to scare Royce off the dock. He had to disappear completely, leaving the ship stranded and my family's celebration in ruins. As the harbor's quiet hum wrapped around me, I tightened my grip on the flashlight. This was my moment, and I wasn't backing down. By dawn, the Voyager was ready to sail, its decks buzzing with passengers, my family among them, oblivious to the storm I'd brewed. Clint and I had regrouped at his apartment, a cluttered space smelling of coffee and old leather. He was at his laptop, the tracker's signal still pinging Royce's location, a cheap motel near the harbor. "He's laying low," Clint said, sipping from a chipped mug. "But he's back on the ship now. Crew schedule has him on board for departure." "Good," I said, my voice low. "He thinks he's safe. Let's hit him again." Clint nodded, pulling up the ship's control app he'd hacked using Royce's careless passwords. Our next move was a delayed message, set to hit Royce's smartwatch an hour after the ship left port. It would be another blackmail demand, sharper this time, tied to his illegal gambling detours. We'd make him think his secrets were closing in, forcing him to bolt mid-cruise. Clint had a GPS scrambler ready to cut his devices from any tracking once he fled, ensuring he'd vanish without a trace. I typed the message on Clint's burner phone, my fingers steady despite the adrenaline. "Your gambling payoffs are public. Names, dates, wired accounts. Get off the Voyager now or you're done." I scheduled it to send at 11 a.m., when the ship would be far enough from shore to make Royce's escape messy but feasible. "He's got a skiff," Clint said, pointing to a ship blueprint he'd swiped from a contact. "Emergency boat, starboard side. If he panics, that's his out." "He'll panic," I said, picturing Royce's cocky grin from our chance meeting. The anchor charm I'd slipped into his pocket. That tracker was still live, a silent tether to his every move. "He's not built for pressure," Clint grinned, plugging the scrambler into his laptop. "Once he's on that skiff, this baby fries his phone, his watch, anything pinging a signal. He'll be a ghost." I leaned back, the weight of it settling in. Martin and Clarice would be sipping champagne, toasting Dad's legacy, while their captain abandoned ship. The Voyager would stall, passengers would panic, and my family's perfect cruise would unravel. Jules's text, "Clarice doesn't want drama," flashed in my mind. This was more than drama. This was my reclaiming what they'd stolen. My stake, my pride, my place. The ship sailed at 10 a.m. I watched from the pier, a safe distance away, my scarf shielding my face. The Voyager's horn blared, a deep, arrogant sound, as it pulled from the dock. I imagined Martin on deck, Clarice at his side, Jules maybe waving, unaware of the text that had barred Aunt Eve. My hands clenched, but I smiled. They'd feel me soon. At 11:02, Clint texted, "Message sent. Trackers moving." I was at his apartment, staring at his laptop, the tracker's dot jerking across a map of the ship. Royce was on the move, fast, from the bridge to the starboard deck. "He got it," I said, my voice tight with anticipation. Clint zoomed in on the ship's cameras, still looped from his hack. "There," he said, pointing to a grainy feed. Royce, his captain's hat gone, a duffel slung over his shoulder, was at the starboard rail, glancing around like a hunted animal. He muttered something. "Damn it, who the hell knows?" His voice faint but audible, through the ship's mic system Clint had tapped. I leaned closer, my breath shallow. I knew Brandon. I knew everything. His bribes, his detours to gambling waters, his powerful friends who couldn't save him now. I'd turned his secrets into a noose, and he was running straight into it. The feed showed him untying a small skiff, the emergency boat Clint had flagged. He moved fast, his hand shaking as he lowered it to the water. The tracker's dot followed, dropping from the ship's deck to the sea. "He's out," Clint said, his fingers poised over the scrambler. "Ready? Do it," I said. Clint hit the button, and the tracker's signal flatlined, along with Royce's phone and watch. The scrambler fried their GPS, leaving no trace of where he'd gone. The skiff was a speck on the camera feed, vanishing into the gray waves. Royce was gone, a ghost, just as we'd planned. I exhaled, my hands trembling with the thrill of it. The Voyager was adrift now, its captain missing, its crew scrambling. Martin and Clarice would be pacing, their reunion souring as the ship idled, passengers demanding answers. I pictured Jules's face, confused, maybe guilty, remembering her text. They'd know this wasn't random. Not yet, but soon. Clint closed his laptop, his grin wide. "Clean work, Evie. They're stuck out there till the Coast Guard sorts it." I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. Royce's disappearance was the blow, but I wanted them to feel me. Evelyn Harper, the sister they'd discarded. I'd left a clue, a small one, in the ship's log during my harbor office visit. My initials, scribbled on a maintenance note. Easy to miss, unless someone looked hard. Martin might see it, might wonder. That was enough for now. As I drove home, the harbor fading behind me, a flicker of doubt crept in. Royce was gone, but what if he resurfaced, talked, pointed fingers? What if Clarice's lawyers sniffed out my trail? I pushed it down. I'd been careful. Gloves, burners, Clint's hacks. The tracker was dead, the skiff untraceable. I'd won this round, but the game wasn't over. Martin and Clarice owed me more than a ruined cruise. They owed me my place, and I'd make sure they paid. The Starlight Voyager was adrift, its captain a ghost, thanks to the skiff I'd watched vanish into the gray waves on Clint's hacked camera feed. Brandon Royce, spooked by our blackmail message, exposing his gambling bribes, had fled. His smartwatch and phone, fried by Clint's GPS scrambler. My family, Martin, Clarice, Jules, were somewhere on that ship, their reunion crumbling as the reality of a missing captain set in. I'd won this round, but I wasn't done. The plan had shifted when I'd slipped aboard before dawn. Hiding in a laundry area, Clint's blueprints flagged as a security blind spot. I wanted to see their chaos up close, to feel the weight of their regret. As I settled into the dim, humming space, my thermos of tea warm in my hands, I whispered, "Let's see how you handle this, Martin." Getting on board had been a gamble. While Clint worked his laptop from the supply shed, I'd used my memorized crew schedule from the harbor office to slip past the guards during a shift change. My old volunteer badge, tucked in my pocket, was a flimsy cover, but the darkness and my gray scarf helped me blend into the shadows. The laundry area, tucked below deck, was a maze of humming machines and stacked linens, its single camera disabled by Clint's hack. I'd stashed a small bag, water, snacks, a flashlight, behind a dryer, ready to wait out the storm I'd sparked. By noon, the ship was mid-ocean, and the chaos I'd engineered erupted. I'd tapped into the ship's PA system using a crew radio I'd swiped, its volume low but clear. The first mate's voice crackled, tense. "All passengers, remain calm. We're addressing a crew issue. Stay in your cabins until further notice." I smirked, sipping my tea. Crew issue. Royce's absence was unraveling their control, just as I'd planned. I crept to a vent near the laundry door, its slats giving me a sliver of a view to the main deck above. Passengers milled, their voices sharp with confusion. Clarice's shrill tone cut through. "This is unacceptable. Where's the captain? Martin, do something." She stood by a railing, her designer dress wrinkled, her face pale. Martin beside her looked smaller than I remembered, his tech bro confidence gone. "I'm handling it, Clarice," he said, his voice tight, but his hands fidgeted, betraying him. "Handling it," Clarice snapped, tossing her hair. "We're stuck out here. What kind of operation is this?" I bit back a laugh, my thermos warm against my palms. Martin, always the fixer, was in over his head, barking at a crew member who shrugged helplessly. Jules hovered nearby, her phone in hand, her eyes darting. I wondered if she was texting me, regretting her no-drama message. I'd check later. For now, I savored the disarray, their perfect crews collapsing under the weight of my absence. And Royce's. The vent's view was limited, but the radio kept me updated. The first mate announced a delay, citing technical difficulties, but whispers of "missing captain" spread among the crew. Passengers demanded refunds, kids cried, and Clarice's voice grew louder, threatening lawsuits. Martin tried to rally the crew, suggesting a search of the ship, but his orders were met with eye rolls. "He's not a captain," I heard a deckhand mutter. I grinned, picturing Dad's face. His fishing boat never needed a suit like Martin to run it. I settled back, nibbling a granola bar, when footsteps echoed outside the laundry door. My heart lurched. I stuffed the thermos behind a linen stack, crouching low as the door creaked open. A crew member stepped in, young, maybe 25, his uniform rumpled. He carried a clipboard, his flashlight sweeping the room. I held my breath, praying Clint's camera loop held. His light paused on my corner, and I braced for a shout. Instead, he squinted, stepping closer. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice low, familiar. I froze, my mind racing. "Who's asking?" I said, barely audible, ready to bolt. "It's Tommy," he said, lowering the flashlight. "From the harbor office. You brought banana bread last month." I exhaled, recognizing him. Marla's nephew, a summer hire I'd trained on filing manifests. "Tommy," I said, standing slowly, my hands up. "What are you doing here?" "Night shift," he said, glancing at the door. "What about you?" "Nobody's supposed to be down here." I hesitated, my pulse still hammering. He could turn me in, ruin everything, but his eyes were curious, not accusing. "I'm settling a score," I said, testing him. "My family's on board. They cut me out." He nodded, a slow grin spreading. "Heard about the captain. That you?" I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. Tommy chuckled, tucking the clipboard under his arm. "You're a legend, Evelyn. Don't worry, I didn't see you." Relief flooded me, but I stayed wary. "Why help me?" He shrugged. "You were always good to me, and this ship's a circus. Royce was a jerk anyway. Just don't get caught." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thanks, Tommy." He slipped out, the door clicking shut. I sank against the wall, my hands shaking. A close call, but a gift. Tommy's loyalty was a wild card I hadn't expected. I checked the radio. The first mate was calling for an emergency Coast Guard contact. The ship was stalled, passengers furious, Martin and Clarice's dream in tatters. I pictured Dad's laugh, rough from years at sea. He'd have loved this, but the game wasn't over. Tommy's silence bought me time, but the Coast Guard would board soon, and I'd need an exit. Clint was on shore, ready to guide me off when the ship docked. But I had to stay hidden, and there was Jules. Her guilt might push her to dig, to find my initials in the ship's log. If she did, Martin would know I'd struck back. I wanted that, but not yet. For now, I sipped my tea. The laundries hummed my cover and watched their world fray. They'd barred me, but I was here, the shadow they'd never see coming. I crouched in the laundry area, the hum of the machines masking my shallow breaths. Tommy's unexpected loyalty, still a warm spark in my chest. His recognition from my harbor volunteer days had saved me from exposure, but the Starlight Voyager was a powder keg now. Captain Royce was gone, vanished on his skiff after our blackmail message exposed his gambling bribes, his devices fried by Clint's GPS scrambler. The ship idled mid-ocean, the crew scrambling, passengers furious, and my family, Martin, Clarice, Jules, trapped in the chaos I'd engineered. I sipped my tea, the thermos steady in my hands, savoring their unraveling through the stolen crew radio. Martin's futile attempts to lead, Clarice's shrill demands. It was all falling apart, just as I'd planned. But I wasn't done. Hiding had served its purpose. Now I wanted them to see me. 2 days into the cruise, the ship was a mess. The radio buzzed with updates. The Coast Guard was hours away, passengers were near mutiny, and the crew was demoralized without Royce. I'd stayed hidden, slipping to a maintenance closet for food scraps when the halls were clear, my volunteer badge a flimsy shield. Clint texted from shore, "Coast Guard's coming, get ready to bail." But I had other plans. Martin and Clarice had barred me from this ship, voided my 25% ownership with their legal tricks, called me too old, too frail. They'd erased me from Dad's legacy. Now, I'd walk into their world, uninvited, and take it back. I waited until dinner, when the passengers gathered in the dining room, their grumbling a low roar. I ditched the hoodie for a clean blouse from my bag, brushed my gray hair, and pinned it up, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. The mirror in the laundry room showed a woman who'd been underestimated, 68, with lines earned from caring for Dad, teaching kids, and surviving betrayal. I slipped the crew radio into my pocket, grabbed my thermos like a prop, and headed for the dining room. My steps deliberate. The guards were distracted, the cameras still looped from Clint's hack. This was my moment. The dining room doors swung open, and I walked in, head high, the clatter of silverware and voices dropping to a stunned hush. Faces turned. Passengers, crew, my family at a center table. Martin froze, his fork midair. Clarice's wine glass trembled, her eyes wide. Jules gasped, her phone slipping to the table. I stood there, letting their shock wash over me, my thermos dangling casually in one hand. Clarice recovered first, her voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, slow and deliberate, stepping closer. "Just checking if the captain enjoyed the banana bread." He did vanish so suddenly, didn't he? The room buzzed, heads turning. Martin's face paled, his napkin crumpling in his fist. "Evelyn, how?" he stammered, but Clarice cut him off, standing, her heels clicking. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "You're not supposed to be here. Security." I raised a hand, calm, my eyes locked on hers. "Before you call anyone, Clarice, let's talk about ownership. You thought your lawyer buried my 25% of this ship, called me unstable due to age, right? But you missed a clause, Dad's trust. My share's still mine. Check the records." Her mouth opened, then shut, her cheeks flushing. Martin shifted, his eyes darting to Jules, who stared at me, torn between awe and guilt. The crew at the edges of the room leaned in, their murmurs growing. I turned to them, my voice clear. "You've been loyal to a captain who sold you out for bribes. I'm offering a better deal. Bonuses, full transparency, starting now. Honor my authority, and we'll run this ship right. A deckhand. Tommy, his grin subtle, nodded, and others followed, their postures shifting. Clarice's face twisted, but before she could speak, Martin stood, his voice shaky. Evie, please, let's talk. This is Clarice's doing, not mine. I didn't want this. I looked at him, my brother, the man who'd let his wife erase me. His plea was weak, a deflection, and it only fueled the fire in my chest. Clarice scoffed, her laugh cutting through the tension. Oh please, Martin. She's a relic with nothing to live for, stirring trouble because she's got no one left. The room went silent, her words a slap. I felt every eye on me, waiting. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small recorder I'd carried since Clint suggested it. A relic, huh? I said, my voice steady. I pressed play, and Clarice's voice filled the room, clipped and cold, from a call I'd intercepted with Clint's help. Remove Evelyn. She's an embarrassment with shaky hands. I won't have her ruining this. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jules's hand flew to her mouth. Martin's face crumpled, his eyes on Clarice, who stood frozen, her wine glass shaking. I stopped the recording, pocketing it. My hands may shake, I said, holding them up, steady now. But they never dropped a damn thing I loved. The crew erupted, their murmurs turning to shouts. She's got no right, Tommy yelled, pointing at Clarice. Passengers joined in, their anger shifting from the stalled ship to her. Martin sank into his chair, his head in his hands. Jules stood, tears in her eyes, and ran to me, hugging me tight. I'm sorry, Aunt Eve, she whispered. I didn't know. I hugged her back, my throat tight. I know, kid, it's okay. Clarice tried to rally, her voice shrill. This is a stunt, she's lying. But the crew wasn't listening. Tommy and a mate blocked her path, their loyalty now mine. Martin looked at her, his face hard, and I saw the fracture, his marriage, already fragile, cracking wide open. I stepped back, the thermos in my hand, the room's energy electric. I'd revealed myself, reclaimed my share, and turned their world upside down. The Coast Guard would arrive soon, and I'd slip off with Clint's help, my point made. But as I looked at Martin, defeated, and Clarice, unraveling, I felt a pang, not victory, but clarity. They'd try to erase me, but I was here, undeniable. Months later, I heard Martin divorced Clarice. She'd left Portland, her reputation in tatters, after the crew spread the recording. Jules visited me often, our bond stronger, her guilt fading. I stayed in my apartment, volunteering at the harbor, my share of the Voyager restored. I didn't need the ship, just the knowledge I'd fought for it. I stood on my balcony one evening, watering my ferns, the harbor lights soft in the distance. What would you do if your family tried to erase you? Would you fight back? I did. And it wasn't just about the ship, it was about me, Evelyn Harper, 68, with hands that shook but never let go. Justice wasn't loud, it was this, standing tall, speaking truth, and walking away whole. I stood on my balcony, the harbor lights twinkling, the memory of my dining room showdown still vivid. Clarice's face crumpling as my recording exposed her. Martin's defeat. Jules's tearful hug. I'd reclaimed my 25% of the Starlight Voyager, turned the crew to my side, and left my family's cruise in chaos, all without shedding blood. Captain Royce's disappearance, sparked by our blackmail, and Clint's GPS scrambler, had done its job. But the story wasn't over. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't just about the moment. It was about making sure the pieces landed right. Months later, Clint called, his voice crackling with excitement. Evie, you'll love this. Royce turned up in Argentina, broke, hiding in some dive bar. Local cops nabbed him after an anonymous tip. I smiled, knowing the tip was mine. I'd kept the GPS data from Royce's tracker, stored on Clint's burner phone, and sent it to a contact at the harbor who knew Interpol. Royce's gambling bribes had caught up, his powerful friends abandoning him. He was extradited, facing charges, his name mud in the headlines. The story broke in Portland's papers, Cruise captain's disappearance tied to gambling scandal. My role stayed hidden, but whispers spread at the harbor. Dock workers I'd trained, like Tommy, grinned when I dropped off banana bread. Heard you shook things up, Evelyn, Marla said, winking. I shrugged, but the nickname stuck. Harbor legend. Kids at the office asked for my stories, half joking, half odd. I didn't confirm or deny, just kept volunteering, logging manifests, my share of the Voyager secure. Jules visited often, her guilt gone, our bond tight. Martin, divorced from Clarice, sent a letter, apologetic, rambling. I didn't reply. He'd learn by living with his choices. Clarice vanished from Portland, her legal tricks exposed, her reputation ruined. The ship sailed again, under a new captain, and I got quarterly dividends, a quiet victory. One evening, I watered my ferns. Paul's watch ticking on my wrist. The headlines had faded, but the harbor's respect hadn't. I'd fought for my place, not with noise, but with precision. Royce gone, my family humbled, my name restored. Justice wasn't revenge, it was this. Standing on my balcony, 68, free, with hands that shook but held firm. I'd tipped the scales, and the world knew Evelyn Harper wasn't erasable. Now tell me, have you ever been underestimated because of your age, your gender, or your silence? Don't let them write your story. Hit subscribe if you're still with me, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? I want to read every single country, because tomorrow's story, it'll be even bolder. I'm Evelyn Banks, and I'm not done yet.